How does a nation with almost no rainfall build one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known? Ask the river that runs through the middle of it all. For 5,000 years before anyone drew its borders, this land was already alive, fed, held together, and buried by a single ribbon of water threading through the harshest desert on the planet. You think you know this place, the pyramids, the camels, a postcard sunset over sand. You have never seen it like this. Start with the numbers, because the numbers refuse to be believed. A river long recognized as the longest on Earth, though a rival in South America has spent a century contesting the title, and the argument still isn't settled, runs the entire length of this country, north, against the instinct of almost every other river you've ever crossed. Along its banks, more than 100 million people, nearly all of Egypt, crowded onto a strip of green that from above looks like a single vein cut into red stone. 96% of this country is desert you could die in within a day. The other 4% has fed an empire, uninterrupted, for 5,000 years. One monument here required 2.3 million blocks of stone, hauled by hand, floated down that same river, and stacked with a precision so exact that for 4,000 years, nothing has closed the gap between them. Finished around 2560 BC, still standing, the only one of the ancient world's 7 wonders that is. This is a country where summer air over open desert can push past 50 degrees Celsius by early afternoon, and where a few hundred kilometers away, the same water that built an empire still floods the same fields on almost the same schedule it always has, adjusted now by one enormous dam instead of an unpredictable sky. Nearby, a creature with a lion's body and a human face has watched the sun rise for roughly 4,500 years, carved from a single stone. Not one Egyptologist, not one inscription can tell you with certainty who ordered it built or why its nose is gone. And 600 kilometers south, buried inside a mountain, there is one room that still tells time. Twice a year and only twice, sunlight travels 60 meters through solid rock to touch the face of a king and the gods who approved him. And once a year, deliberately, it touches everything except the god of the dark. Nobody has recalibrated it in over 3,000 years. It still works to the day. 5,000 years old, still precise to the day, still waiting for you. We are going to reach that room. Stay until we do. The plateau at Giza sits just outside a city of 20 million. And the first thing that startles you is the proximity, how ordinary apartment blocks and satellite dishes crowd right up to the edge of eternity, as if nobody told the modern world to keep its distance. Then you see it properly, Khufu's pyramid, 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite, some of them weighing 80 tons, quarried, floated, dragged, and set in place across roughly 20 years, finished close to 2560 B. See at completion it stood 146.6 meters tall. Erosion and the theft of its polished casing stones have taken 9 meters since. It is still, after 4,500 years, one of the largest structures a human hand has ever made. Stand at its base at first light. The stone is the color of raw honey for exactly 9 minutes. Then it goes the color of bone. A single guard walks the perimeter, radio crackling at his hip, dwarfed the way a lighthouse keeper is dwarfed by his own tower. Heat already rises off the sand in visible sheets by 8 in the morning. Somewhere below your feet, hidden chambers still keep secrets that ground-penetrating radar has only begun to sketch. Here is the story most people carry in their heads. Slaves, whips, a pharaoh's cruelty carved in stone. It is a good story, it is not the true one. Archaeologists excavating nearby have found something else entirely, a purpose-built town for the workforce, with its own bakeries, its own beer, a cemetery for the builders themselves, buried with the same care as royalty. These were not slaves. They were skilled laborers, fed, housed, and buried with honor for building a tomb they would never lie in. Round trip, 20,000 people, 20 years, one long project passed from father to son. Some of them likely die of it. Broken backs, crushed hands, a fall from an unfinished tier that ends everything before lunch. That cost is never on the postcard. By noon, the tour buses arrive, and the plateau fills with color and noise. Vendors, camel handlers, the particular chaos of a wonder that has to share its silence with a parking lot, and still, somehow, it does not shrink. You round a corner, and the scale hits you fresh every time, like a physical push. There's a number that does something to people when they actually sit with it. 2.3 million blocks. Say it slowly. 2.3 million, one for every year since, times 10 and then some. This is Egypt's oldest lie, corrected in stone. Not built by suffering alone, but by hands that were paid, fed, and remembered. Now leave the tomb. Go meet the thing that guards it. The Great Sphinx lies a short walk from Khufu's shadow, and it takes people by surprise every time. Smaller in photographs than it is standing in front of it. And stranger, 73 meters long, 20 meters tall, a lion's body with a pharaoh's face, carved not from imported stone but from the bedrock of the plateau itself, quarried in place. The same limestone ridge that gave up the blocks for the pyramids around it. Most Egyptologists date it to the reign of Khafre, roughly 2558 to 2532 B.C., which would make it about 4,500 years old. One continuous piece of rock, never assembled, never repaired at its foundation, just carved down out of what was already there. Look closer, and the body tells a harder story than the face. The lower legs are solid, barely touched by time. The torso has crumbled and been patched for centuries, because the stone there is softer, more porous, more willing to give up its shape to wind. Only the head survived clean, cut from a harder layer near the top of the ridge, as if the plateau itself decided which parts of this king deserved to last. Ask anyone why the nose is missing, and you'll get the same answer. Napoleon's cannon, a stray shot, French soldiers with nothing better to aim at. It's a wonderful story. It is also false. Sketches and travelers' accounts from centuries before Napoleon ever set foot in Egypt already show a sphinx with no nose. Something else took it: vandalism, erosion, a chisel in someone's hand centuries earlier, and no one has ever proven exactly whose. There's a word the ancient Egyptians may have used for this face, and there's a Greek word laid over it later, and there's a medieval Arabic name for it too, Abu al-Hol, father of terror, and none of them fully agree with each other about what this thing actually was for. A guardian, a sun god, a king reaching for immortality through stone, maybe all three. There's a question here that 4,500 years hasn't answered, and it isn't going to get answered tonight either. Some things earn the right to stay unexplained. Tourists queue for the photograph where their outstretched hand appears to touch its chin. Children do it. Grandparents do it. For 1 second, a face carved before writing was common gets treated like an old friend. This is a question with no answer, and Egypt has learned to live comfortably inside the not knowing. Now come down off the plateau, into the city that lives at its feet. Because a country isn't only its monuments. It's what people eat for lunch. Leave the desert for 20 minutes, and you're in downtown Cairo, on a street corner where a metal cart throws off steam and noise before you can even see what's cooking. This is where koshari lives: rice, brown lentils, and small pasta layered under chickpeas, drowned in a garlicky tomato sauce sharpened with vinegar, and finished with a fistful of onions fried down to a deep, sweet crunch. Ask any Egyptian what their national dish is, and this is the answer. Almost without exception, a dish so central it was formally recognized as intangible cultural heritage in 2025. Watch the vendor work. He layers each bowl in seconds: rice, then lentils, then macaroni, then the ladle of sauce that hits the bottom of a steel bowl with a ring you can hear over the traffic. When an order comes in for 4 or 5 bowls at once, the whole cart turns into something closer to a drum line than a kitchen. Ladles against steel, onions hissing, the vinegar bottle uncapped and recapped in one motion. People eat standing, on plastic stools, on the tailgate of a parked truck, spooning it in fast because it's lunch, and lunch here doesn't linger. Here's the detail that outsiders miss. Koshari has no meat, no dairy, nothing that separates a rich table from a poor one. It began by most accounts as food for laborers, cheap grain and legumes stretched to feed a family, and it never left. A construction worker eats the same bowl, made the same way, as a university professor 3 streets over. In a country where almost everything else divides by class, this dish simply doesn't. There's a garlic vinegar sauce that regulars call daka, and a chili sauce called shada on the side for anyone brave enough, and an old rivalry between families over whose tomato sauce is the correct one. Thinner here, sweeter there. A private argument that has never once been settled and never will be. There's a disagreement even about where this dish came from. One version says it's genuinely Egyptian, tracing back through an ancient word, koshari, describing a breakfast of lentils and wheat once eaten after fasting in the pharaonic calendar. The more widely repeated version says something else entirely, that koshari arrived with the British in the late 19th century, adapted from an Indian dish called khichdi, rice and lentils cooked together and simply never left. Nobody has definitively settled which version is true. Either way, it's Egypt's now, argued over, defended, and eaten 3 times a day regardless of where it came from. This is Egypt's dish for everyone, and no one sitting over a bowl of it is a stranger. Now walk back down to the water that made all of this possible in the first place. Everything you have seen so far, the stone, the street, the crowd, exists because of one thing, and it's easy to walk past it without really looking. The Nile moves through Cairo wide and unhurried, the color of strong tea in the afternoon light, and along its banks, the feluccas still work the way they have for centuries. No engine, just a single triangular sail, and a man who has spent his whole life reading which way the wind wants to go. Meet one of them at midday, patching a tear in his sail with the kind of stitch his father used, and his father's father before that. He works cross-legged on the wooden deck, needle through canvas, squinting against the glare bouncing off the water. His boat carries tourists most afternoons and cargo most mornings, and either way it earns exactly enough. Ask him what he'd do without the river, and he doesn't really understand the question. There is no without the river, not here, not for his family, not for 4,000 years of families before his. This is the paradox at the center of everything. A country defined by sand depends, completely and without exception, on water. Take the Nile away for even one season in Egypt, as anyone understands, it simply stops existing. No crops, no cities, no pyramids that ever got built in the first place, because there is no surplus of grain to feed 20,000 laborers for 20 years, without a river flooding its banks on schedule every single year like clockwork. The ancient Egyptians called it a gift. They were being literal, not poetic. Motorboats are cheaper to run and faster besides, and plenty of operators along this stretch of the river have already switched over entirely. He hasn't, not yet. Partly because a sailboat costs nothing to fuel, partly because tourists specifically ask for the ones with the triangular sail, the ones that look like the postcard, whether that's tradition surviving on its own terms or tradition surviving because it happens to be profitable. He doesn't spend much time deciding. The wind is free, the rest sorts itself out. Down at the water's edge, a boy no older than 10 fishes with a hand line for whatever the current brings him, patient in a way that looks like it was taught rather than learned. Somewhere behind him, a call to prayer starts up from a minaret and drifts out over the water. And for a moment, the traffic noise from the corniche fades under it. This is a river that asks for hands every single day and gets them. Now follow it north, because in the spring, this same water turns into something that puts a whole nation's health ministry on high alert. Every spring, on the day after Coptic Easter, Egypt does something its own government actively warns against. The holiday is called Sham el-Nessim, smelling the breeze, and it traces back, by most accounts, roughly 4,500 years, older than almost anything else still celebrated here. Families spread blankets in public parks, color eggs the way children everywhere do, and then they eat fesik. Fesik is gray mullet, sun-dried, then packed in salt and left to ferment for weeks in an airtight barrel. Done right by a family whose recipe has survived 3 or 4 generations, it's a delicacy people wait all year for. Done wrong, not enough salt, an improperly sealed barrel, a fish that wasn't fresh to begin with. It can produce a toxin that causes botulism. In 1991, 18 people died from it in a single season. Egypt's Ministry of Health issues a warning nearly every year before the holiday in plain language: avoid it entirely, especially if it's homemade. Nearly every year, people eat it anyway. There's an old joke that circulates every spring, told slightly differently depending on who's telling it. Physique won't give you a stomachache. You either die or you live. It is meant to be funny. It is not entirely a joke. The holiday's name has roots even older than the dish itself. Sham el-Nessim traces back to an ancient word for the season when the Nile's flood began to recede. The moment farmers could finally read the coming harvest in the fresh black soil left behind. Physique isn't even the only risky option on the table that day. Herring, called renga, competes for the same plates, and an intensely salty preserve called maluha shows up further south. Every one of them runs on the same logic. Salt a fish hard enough, long enough, and it survives a season that would otherwise spoil it within hours. To an outsider, this looks like recklessness. To the families lined up outside a trusted physic shop the week before the holiday, and there are lines, real ones, hours long. It looks like Tuesday. A grandmother who has bought from the same seller for 30 years isn't gambling. She's trusting a relationship. The danger is real, and so is the ritual wrapped around managing it. Buy only from a name you know. Never make it yourself. Never eat it. If the smell is wrong, in a way that's different from its usual, enormous wrongness. This is a dish that could kill you, served every spring next to a park full of children with dyed eggs. And to them, this is Tuesday. To everyone else, it's a dare. Now come south, along the river, to a temple built to hold up the sky itself. Karnak rises out of Luxor, like something too large to have been imagined by anyone sane. And in a sense, it wasn't imagined all at once. It was added to, generation after generation, pharaoh after pharaoh, for close to 2,000 years, until it became the largest religious complex ever constructed by human hands, ancient or modern. Walk into its great hypostyle hall and the scale stops making sense. 134 columns, some over 20 meters tall, packed so densely that the aisles between them go dark at midday even under a cloudless Egyptian sky. Stand under the tallest columns and look straight up. Carved capitals shaped like papyrus blooms, so large that 12 people linking hands couldn't circle the base of one. Sound behaves strangely in here. Voices from 30 meters away arrive muffled and delayed, swallowed by all that stone. Every dynasty that mattered added something to Karnak, which means walking through it is less like touring one temple and more like reading 2,000 years of the same argument, made in stone, by successive kings, each trying to outdo the last. I was here and I mattered more. Outside the temple walls, a stone avenue nearly 2 miles long once connected Karnak directly to Luxor Temple to the south, lined the entire distance with Sphinx statues, ram-headed at this end. Human-faced further along, a processional road built for festivals that hasn't hosted one in nearly 2,000 years, but still, mostly, stands. Restoration work in recent decades has cleared long stretches of it, and at dusk, once the tour groups thin out, you can walk a section of it in something close to the quiet it was originally built for. A caretaker who has worked inside these walls for over 20 years still makes the same rounds every closing time, checking locks on doors that guard nothing anyone could actually carry away. Just stone, older than every religion currently practiced on Earth, that needs protecting from time now and from nothing else. Remember the river we just left, because Karnak was built to face it. Every temple in this valley was positioned deliberately along the same axis as the Nile, aligned with the same water that fed the workers who built it, floated the stone that built it, and still today floods every field for a mile around it every year on schedule. If you already knew a single religious complex could take 2,000 years to build, tell me below. Most people don't, until they're standing inside it, wondering how long they've actually been walking. This is a temple built by an argument that never ended, and somehow the argument is the point. Now go where the kings finally stopped arguing, into the ground. Cross to the west bank of the Nile at Luxor, and the temperature changes before the landscape does. Hotter, drier, the green suddenly gone, replaced by bare limestone hills that look scorched even in shade. This is the Valley of the Kings, where starting around 1550 BC, Egypt's rulers abandoned pyramids entirely and began hiding their tombs instead, cut deep into rock, disguised, sealed, built to be forgotten on purpose. It didn't work, not completely. Most tombs here were looted within a few generations, sometimes by the very officials paid to guard them. But one wasn't. In 1922, a small, unassuming entrance led to the tomb of a minor, largely forgotten teenage king named Tutankhamun, sealed and untouched for over 3,000 years, packed with gold that still looked freshly cast. There's a story people love to repeat about a curse, a pharaoh's revenge on anyone who disturbs his rest. Several members of the excavation team dead within years of the opening. It's a wonderful story. The science is duller and more honest. Sealed tombs trap mold spores and fungal toxins for centuries in air that never circulates. And more than one archaeologist walking into a freshly opened chamber has breathed in something that made them sick, sometimes fatally. No curse, just biology, patient enough to wait 3,000 years for a door to open. The men who carved and painted these tombs lived in their own purpose-built village nearby. Generation after generation of the same handful of families, passing the work and its secrecy from father to son, the same way Giza's builders once had. They often knew exactly where every treasure lay hidden, which is likely part of why so many tombs were emptied within a lifetime or two of being sealed. The workers who knew a tomb best were sometimes the ones with the least reason to leave it alone. Walk down into one of the deeper tombs and the sound changes first. Footsteps go flat, voices go dead. The air itself seems to absorb anything you throw at it. The only noise left is a guide's flashlight clicking on, and then further in, water dripping from somewhere that shouldn't have water at all. Nothing else. Nothing else at all. There's a word in Arabic that some guides use for the particular stillness of this place, and it doesn't translate cleanly into English. Maybe it isn't supposed to. This is where Egypt stopped building upward and started building downward instead. And either way, it was always about refusing to disappear. Now leave the tombs. Go back to the river and follow it toward the price it exacts for everything it gives. South of Luxor, the Nile changes character entirely, narrowing between granite hills near Aswan before opening just beyond the city, into something the ancient world never had to reckon with. A lake over 500 kilometers long, held back by one of the largest dams ever built on Earth. The Aswan High Dam, completed in 1970, tamed the annual flood that had defined this country for 5,000 years. The same flood that fed the workers at Giza, that watered every field along Karnak's axis, that Egyptians once worshipped as a literal gift, arriving on schedule every single year like a promise nobody had ever broken. Taming it came at a price nobody expected to have to pay. As the dam rose, the water behind it began to climb, and directly in its path sat two temples carved into a mountainside 600 kilometers south, temples that had faced the sunrise in exactly the same alignment for over 3,000 years. Left alone, they would have vanished under the new lake within a decade, so an international team under UNESCO did something that had never been attempted at this scale. They cut both temples into more than 1,000 blocks, each one numbered, mapped, and lifted by crane, and reassembled the entire complex 65 meters higher and 200 meters back from the water, rebuilt so precisely that the ancient alignments survived the move nearly intact. Nearly, the rebuilding shifted the calendar by exactly 1 day. Stand on top of the dam itself, and the scale flips inside out. Instead of looking up at something ancient, you're looking down at something new. A wall of rock and clay 111 meters high, nearly 4 kilometers long, holding back a reservoir that stretches roughly 500 kilometers south, deep into Sudan. Lake Nasser has since become a working fishery in its own right, feeding a trade that simply didn't exist here 50 years ago. Below the dam, the river that emerges on the far side is calmer than it has been in 5,000 years. The annual flood that once buried Egypt in fresh silt without fail every single year simply doesn't happen the same way anymore. Farmers gained certainty. They lost the free fertilizer a flood used to leave behind, and now buy it instead, delivered in sacks rather than water. That is the cost this river asks for, every time it changes. Something has to move, something has to be paid, something has to be given up so something older can keep existing. A flood tamed, a temple lifted, a calendar nudged by 24 hours after 3,000 years of perfect accuracy. This is a river that never simply gives. It trades. And what it traded for on this occasion is the room we promised you at the very beginning. 600 kilometers south of Cairo, cut into a sandstone cliff above the waterline of the lake that nearly swallowed it, sits the temple we opened this journey with, the room that still tells time. Twice a year, on the 22nd of February and the 22nd of October, sunlight enters the temple's 60-meter corridor at dawn and travels uninterrupted straight into its innermost sanctuary. Inside sit 4 seated statues carved from the same rock as everything around them, the king Ramses II, and 3 gods he chose to stand beside him. On these 2 mornings, and only these 2 mornings, the light finds 3 of those 4 faces, Ramses, Ra the sun god, and Amun, king of gods, and leaves the 4th, Ptah, god of the underworld, exactly where he belongs, in permanent shadow. Nobody agrees completely on why these 2 specific dates. Some Egyptologists believe they mark Ramses's coronation and his birthday, 8 months apart on the calendar. Others aren't sure the meaning was ever that literal. What isn't in dispute is the engineering underneath it. A corridor angled with an accuracy that modern surveying equipment can barely improve on. Built over 3,200 years ago, without a single instrument more advanced than a plumb line, and a very, very patient set of priests. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. The temple you're standing inside isn't quite where it was built. It was cut apart and moved block by block in the 1960s, lifted clear of the rising lake behind the dam we just left, and reassembled with such extraordinary care that the alignment survived almost perfectly. Almost. The move shifted it by 1 single day. What Ramses built to strike on the 21st now strikes on the 22nd. Every year, forever, off by exactly the width of 1 modern rescue operation. By 5 in the morning on these 2 dates, hundreds of people are already standing in the dark outside the temple, coffee going cold in their hands, watching a horizon that hasn't changed its behavior once in 3,200 years. Nobody talks much in that last half hour. There isn't much left to say that the sunrise won't say better. 3,200 years of near-perfect accuracy, corrected by 1 day of human hands trying to save it. This is a clock nobody has touched in 3 millennia, still keeping the only kind of time that ever mattered here. And it kept it even through the one time someone had to physically move it. This is the room we promised. We kept our word. Now go meet the people who still dance for it, twice a year at dawn. A short drive from the temple, along the edge of the new lake, sits a Nubian village that looks like nowhere else in Egypt. Walls painted turquoise. Ochre, a shade of pink that has no business working in a desert and somehow does anyway. Nubia is its own culture inside this country, with its own language, its own music, its own history stretching back as far as the pharaohs it once fought and traded with in equal measure. On festival mornings, when the sun finds its way inside the temple down the road, Nubian musicians and dancers gather outside to mark it. Rhythms and songs distinct from anything you'd hear in Cairo, passed down inside families the way the recipe for fesik is passed down 200 kilometers north, private exact, and never fully written anywhere. Inside one of these houses, 7 days after a birth, a different kind of ceremony happens with almost nobody outside the family ever seeing it. It's called the Sebu, and it traces back, like so much here, to pharaonic times. The baby is placed in a decorated sieve, blue for a boy, pink for a girl, and carried through the house while relatives bang a pestle against a mortar. An old rhythm meant to test the child's hearing, and, some say, to frighten off anything that means it harm. A grandmother stays up half the night beforehand, preparing sugared almonds and little paper cones of sweets for the guests, humming a song that doesn't translate cleanly and isn't meant to. There's a detail in that song about earrings, tracing back, some say, to the goddess Isis, and nobody quite agrees on the rest of what it means anymore. Some things get carried forward exactly because nobody fully understands them. Understanding was never actually the requirement. Remember the river one more time, because it's the only reason any of this exists in the first place. Nubia's fields, Nubia's villages, Nubia's whole 5,000-year argument with the water that both feeds it and once displaced entire towns when the lake behind the dam rose to save a temple. This is a custom older than most nations, celebrated in a house painted the color of something that shouldn't survive a desert, and does. Now leave the water behind completely and go west into sand that has nothing to do with the Nile at all. 300 kilometers into the western desert, hard against the Libyan border, an oasis appears out of nothing, genuinely nothing. Hours of flat gravel plain, and then all at once palm groves, natural springs, and salt lakes so mineral heavy they turn an impossible shade of blue-green under full sun. This is Siwa, and for most of its history, Egypt barely controlled it at all. In 331 BC, a 25-year-old king who had just conquered an empire made an unnecessary detour here, deep into hostile desert, to ask an oracle a single question. His name was Alexander. The oracle he consulted, dedicated to the god Amun, was already ancient by the time he arrived, respected across the Mediterranean world, consulted by kings and generals who came seeking exactly what he came seeking: confirmation. His court historians later claimed the oracle told him what he wanted to hear, that he was in fact divine, the son of a god, the rightful ruler of Egypt. Whether that's precisely what was said inside the temple, nobody alive can confirm. The priests never wrote it down for outsiders. They rarely wrote anything down for outsiders. Above the oasis stands the ruin of a fortress called Shali, built roughly 800 years ago entirely from a local material called kershif, mud brick, mixed with salt scraped straight from the lakes below it. It was inhabited continuously until 1926, when 3 days of unusually heavy rain, vanishingly rare here, dissolved parts of it back into the ground it came from. Locals still tell one particular story about why the rain came that year, and about one family in the fortress who refused to leave even as the walls softened around them. It's a story that doesn't get explained further out here, and asking for the ending just gets you a shrug and a change of subject. Some things are kept exactly the size they were handed down. The lakes themselves hold enough dissolved mineral that swimmers float without trying, the way they do farther east in the Dead Sea. Locals have used the water for generations to ease joint pain and skin conditions, long before anyone thought to call it wellness tourism. Stand at the edge of one at sunset, and the water turns the color of a bruise healing. Blue sliding into green, sliding into something that doesn't quite have a proper name. This is a corner of Egypt that spent most of its history barely belonging to Egypt at all. And a young conqueror once crossed a desert that had already killed other men, just to ask it a question he'd already decided the answer to. Now keep going west, deeper still, to a landscape that looks like it belongs to no country on earth. Farther into the western desert, past even Siwa's isolation, the ground turns white, not sand but chalk and limestone, sculpted by centuries of wind into shapes that look deliberately carved. Mushrooms, towers, something that might be a chicken if you squint at it from exactly the right angle, at exactly the right hour before sunset. Before the landscape though, notice the man first. A Bedouin guide crouches at the base of one formation, brewing tea over a small fire the same way his father taught him, waiting without any visible impatience for a group of tourists to finish photographing rock shapes he has walked past 10,000 times and still, if you ask him, still finds beautiful. Locals have names for the strangest formations, one shaped like a chicken, another like a mushroom the size of a house, and geologists have a duller explanation for all of them. Differential erosion, softer rock worn away faster than the harder layer sitting on top of it. The same basic process that shaped the Sphinx's crumbling body, just given far more time and far less human help. Some of the rock here still holds fossilized shells from when this entire basin sat under a shallow sea, tens of millions of years before the first pharaoh, before the first human, before anything resembling Egypt existed to give it a name. Reach down and pick one up, and you're holding proof that even a desert this absolute used to be an ocean. Patiently, for longer than anything currently alive can really imagine. This place was seabed once, millions of years before anyone stood on two legs to look at it, and the chalk underfoot is made, quite literally, of the compressed skeletons of ancient marine creatures, ground down and reshaped by wind into towers that look at sunset, less like rock and more like something that might start moving if you looked away for long enough. At night, temperatures here can fall by more than 20 degrees Celsius within a couple of hours, the desert giving up its heat as fast as it took it in, and camps light small fires against a cold that feels almost unfair after a day this hot. Overhead, without a single artificial light for 100 kilometers in any direction, the sky fills with more stars than most people have ever actually seen at once. This is a landscape that used to be an ocean floor and somehow feels more alien for it, not despite the emptiness, but because of exactly how full that emptiness turns out to be. Now, before we close, meet the one thing in this country that answers to nobody: the wind itself. Every spring, for a stretch of roughly 50 days between March and May, something arrives from deep in the Sahara that has its own name, its own reputation, and in a very real sense, its own personality: the Khamsin. Hot, dry wind out of the south, capable of raising temperatures by as much as 20 degrees Celsius in under 2 hours, carrying enough sand to drop visibility to almost nothing, and push wind speeds past 140 kilometers an hour at its worst. In Cairo, when the Khamsin comes, you know before you're fully awake, the light through the window turns a strange, thick amber, and somewhere a neighbor is already shouting up to another rooftop to bring the washing in before it disappears under a layer of grit or blows away entirely. Satellite dishes get tied down, balcony doors get wedged shut, restaurants quietly swap fried dishes for broths and yogurt, because the old wisdom here says fried food only worsens what the dry air is already doing to you, and nobody's in a hurry to test whether the old wisdom is wrong. Napoleon's soldiers, invading in 1798, described the Khamsin arriving like a blood-red stain spreading across a distant sky, and by the time it reached them, choking and half-blind, it was already too late to do anything but wait it out. A century and a half later, tanks on both sides of a different war ground to a halt in the same desert, for the same reason, unable to see past their own hoods. Bread sellers who normally lay their trays out, uncovered on handcart switch without being told, to keeping everything wrapped during Khamsin season, an adjustment so automatic that most of them couldn't tell you the year it started, only that their fathers did it too. Farmers time planting and harvest windows around the wind's rough 50-day season, the same way sailors elsewhere plan around a storm calendar, not because anyone wrote the rule down, but because everyone simply knows it by feel. The way you know a season is turning before any calendar confirms it, and then, as fast as it came, it's gone. The wind drops, the amber light clears, and within a day the temperature falls back to something ordinary, as if the whole thing had been a fever the country ran and broke on its own schedule. This is a wind old enough to have a name, powerful enough to stop armies, and reliable enough that everyone here simply plans around it, the way you'd plan around a difficult relative who shows up every spring, whether you've invited them or not. We have gone from stone to water to wind, and underneath every single stop on this journey, one thing was always true. None of it, not the pyramids, not the temples, not the koshari cart or the feluccas shop or the village, painted the color of something that shouldn't survive a desert. None of it exists without the river. Every stone at Giza floated down it. Every field at Karnak drank from it. Every family that has ever gathered at Aswan, at Luxor, at 100 towns whose names never make it into any documentary, has built an entire way of life around the simple, repeated act of a river arriving on schedule and asking in return only that people stay close enough to receive it. Consider what that actually means, laid end to end, a monument nobody has matched in 23 centuries. A dish eaten across every class line that still exists here, a festival willing to risk death for a fish, every single spring without fail. A wind old enough to have stopped invading armies twice 3,000 years apart. None of these things needed each other to survive on their own terms. All of them, without exception, needed the same river. That's the truth underneath the wonder. This isn't a museum of a civilization that used to exist. It's a 5,000-year-old argument between people and a desert that should have killed them. An argument the people have somehow kept winning. One flood, one harvest, one stubbornly rebuilt temple at a time. The pyramids aren't proof that the past was greater than the present. They're proof that whoever built them intended, very deliberately, to still be spoken about right now. By you, in a language and a country that didn't exist when the first block was set in place. It worked. There's a version of this story where Egypt is a place you visit to look backward. Old gods, old stone, a civilization safely finished and filed away. That was never the true version. The version that's actually true is standing in a koshari line at noon, or patching a sail on the same river, or lighting a fire under a formation older than the concept of Egypt itself, and finding all of it, somehow, exactly as alive as it was 5,000 years ago. If you've made it this far, you already know something most people never quite let themselves believe about a country this old. It isn't finished. It was never going to be. Thank you for walking every stone and every mile of sand with me. If a place this stubborn, this improbable, this determined to survive its own desert stayed with you even a little, you know what to do next. Subscribe, and I'll meet you at the next river, the next wonder, the next place you were sure you already understood. Somewhere behind you now, that same river is still moving, past the koshari carts, past the feluccas, past a temple that still tells the only time that has ever really mattered here, exactly the way it has for longer than written language itself. And one more thing before you go. Somewhere in Cairo right now, a vendor's ladle is ringing against a steel bowl at this exact moment. Whether you happen to be watching or not, this country was never waiting for you to notice it. It was just always going to be this alive.